The wind screams through the Dordogne Valley. Temperature? Below freezing. Frostbite sets in within 10 minutes. A modern human would be dead in 3 hours. Yet 60,000 years ago, a Neanderthal mother wraps her children in waterproof hides as darkness falls. She has no matches, no lighter, and according to new evidence, fire that appears and vanishes unpredictably, sometimes absent for entire seasons. For 400,000 winters, Neanderthals conquered Earth's most brutal cold despite inconsistent fire technology. The answer transforms our understanding of human evolution. Archaeologists excavating Roc de Marsal in France found tools, bones, and living spaces. But during the coldest glacial periods, there were gaps. No charcoal, no ash, no burnt anything for extended periods. These weren't abandoned camps. Families lived here for months during brutal Ice Age winters, with fire that disappeared when they needed it most. The same pattern emerged across multiple sites. Continuous occupation through glacial periods, despite fire use variations that should have made survival impossible. Then came Bruniquel Cave. Deep beneath southwestern France, 336 meters from any daylight, Neanderthals built precise circular monuments from 400 broken stalagmites. Total weight, 2 tons. Age, 176,500 years. That's 140,000 years older than any known human construction. Neanderthals were building monuments before Homo sapiens existed. This required planning, team coordination, and artificial lighting to work in total darkness. But here's the key. These underground chambers maintain constant temperatures year-round. When the surface drops to deadly cold, deep caves stay around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. No fire needed. At La Ferracie, they excavated pits positioned exactly where rising body heat would collect and circulate. The consistent east-west orientation across sites separated by hundreds of kilometers suggests shared architectural knowledge. Prehistoric building codes passed through generations. At Molodova, Ukraine, a dome structure using 116 mammoth bones requiring mathematical calculation, 44,000 years ago. At Riparo Bombrini, Italy, 3-tiered thermal zones with warm air rising to sleeping levels, activity zones in the middle, cold storage below. This is engineering. For decades, textbooks stated Neanderthals mastered fire 400,000 years ago. In 2018, French researchers analyzing 59 stone hand axes discovered strike-a-light fire-making technology only appears in the last 50,000 years of Neanderthal existence. Before that, they could maintain fire, but creating it on demand was unreliable. Dr. Marie Seresi noted, "We keep discovering that Neanderthals did things we thought only modern humans could do. Then we find out they did it first." Fire that works sometimes but disappears for weeks during storms or seasonal changes, every winter becomes a gamble unless you develop alternatives. Neanderthals collected manganese dioxide, not for cave paintings, but because it lowers wood's ignition temperature by 360 degrees Fahrenheit, making unreliable fire starting more successful. Some sites show they traveled 40 kilometers to get it, 3 days round trip in Ice Age conditions, just for fire starting material. When fire was available, they maximized it with sophisticated thermal engineering. At Aubric Romani in Spain, 8 evenly spaced hearths lined against rock walls. Computer modeling shows this spacing created optimal convection currents while providing smoke ventilation. At Kabara Cave in Israel, dense hearth concentrations created specialized thermal zones for sleeping, cooking, and working, all designed around heat flow patterns. But when fire wasn't available, their alternative technologies had to be perfect. The Clothing Revolution. February, 45,000 BC. Pêche de Lazé. A grandmother teaches her granddaughter to smooth leather using a polished bone tool. Outside, the cold is lethal. Inside, without fire, they work by muscle memory. The tools they're using, lissoires, are identical to tools used today by Hermès and Louis Vuitton for waterproofing luxury leather. Neanderthals invented them 10,000 years before modern humans arrived in Europe. Despite abundant reindeer bones, they specifically chose ribs from large bovids. Why? Material science. Bovid ribs have the exact density, porosity, and flexibility for leatherworking. At Neumark North, Germany, 200,000-year-old stone scrapers contain oak bark tannin traces, the oldest evidence of chemical hide processing by any hominin. Tanning transforms protein structures, creating flexible, waterproof leather that retains insulation when wet. Without this chemistry, leather freezes solid. At Abri-du-Maras, France, 50,000-year-old three-ply cord made from inner bark fibers, each strand twisted at precisely 30 degrees from maximum strength. They used bone awls and twisted fiber thread to create multi-layered garments with multiple repairs. 125,000 years ago, beside a lake in central Germany, Neanderthals ran an industrial operation, processing over 172 elephants and rhinos across multiple seasons. They weren't primarily after meat, they wanted fat. Specialized production lines sorted bones by fat content, systematically crushed long bones to extract marrow, then processed fragments again to render every drop of grease. The fat from one mammoth could waterproof an entire family's winter wardrobe. Cut marks show standardized techniques. Bone fragments cluster in processing areas separate from living spaces. This was manufacturing. The extracted grease became prehistoric technology's Swiss Army knife, mixed with hide fibers for waterproof fabric, combined with ochre for sunblock, applied to tools to prevent frozen hands, stored as emergency food, providing 9 calories per gram. This site operated 100,000 years before any comparable modern human facility.
Neanderthal anatomy reveals purpose-built adaptations. CT scans show nasal passages 29% larger than ours, with internal turbinates arranged like heat exchangers. Freezing air would spiral through, warming to body temperature before reaching their lungs. Their barrel-shaped ribcage provided 50 liters per minute of airflow, nearly double our 27 liters. This massive respiratory system powered a metabolic furnace burning 5,000 to 7,000 calories daily in winter. The stocky build, perfect thermal engineering. Shorter limbs reduce surface area, broader torsos maintain core temperature. Mathematical modeling shows 20% better heat retention than modern humans. Isotope analysis shows they maintained these metabolic rates year-round, permanently set to Arctic survival mode, generating internal heat equivalent to a continuous 40-watt heating system. From Gibraltar to the Altai Mountains, Neanderthal shelters consistently face south or southwest, maximizing solar heat while minimizing wind exposure. Computer modeling shows they achieved optimal thermal performance for their specific latitudes. At Shanidar Cave, Iraq, stacked stone walls created separate chambers following thermal gradients. At Kibara Cave, sleeping areas form perfect circles with bodies facing inward. Mathematical modeling confirms this arrangement could maintain 59 degrees Fahrenheit using only metabolic heat when outside conditions were lethal. At Sierra de Atapuerca, Spain, repeated seasonal occupation over tens of thousands of years shows complete tool-making sequences. Permanent winter homes returned to generation after generation.
In 2025, experimental archaeologists tested Neanderthal technologies.
Volunteers lived 3 weeks in reconstructed shelters wearing reproduced clothing using only available technologies. Results: birch bark tar waterproofing outperformed modern beeswax, remaining supple at -40 degrees. Multi-component adhesives created bonds stronger than some modern glues. The layered clothing system maintained core body temperature at -22 degrees Fahrenheit for extended periods. Underground shelters achieved 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the surface without any heating source. Most importantly, the complete system created redundancy. If clothing got wet, shelter compensated. If shelter was compromised, clothing and metabolic adaptations maintained temperature. If fire was lost, other systems were sufficient. This was sophisticated risk management. The archaeological record documents care. At La Ferraci, a child with severe congenital abnormalities survived to age 3, only possible with constant care in harsh conditions. At Shanidar, an elderly male with a withered arm and blindness in one eye lived for years after his injuries, supported by his community through Ice Age winters. These weren't brutal savages. They were families who refused to leave anyone behind. Neanderthals survived 400,000 years of climate volatility with stone tools. They weathered ice ages that make our current climate concerns look mild. Yet they still went extinct when change happened too fast. The difference? They had generations to adapt. We have decades. Right now, 4 billion people live in regions experiencing extreme temperatures. Every year, cold exposure kills more people than all natural disasters combined. The solutions Neanderthals developed aren't just history, they're blueprints for survival that military Arctic units, disaster relief organizations, and climate refugees need today. Every principle they discovered, thermal efficiency, resource conservation, community cooperation, applies to our climate challenges. They proved adaptation is possible. During marine isotope stage 3, approximately 39,000 years ago, climate became catastrophically unstable. Seasonal patterns that had remained consistent for millennia suddenly shifted every few years. Resources Neanderthals had relied on for hundreds of thousands of years disappeared unpredictably. Genetic analysis reveals their effective population was always small, perhaps 5,000 to 70,000 individuals scattered across Eurasia. Modern humans arrived with populations 10 times larger. When extreme climate chaos struck, larger populations had better odds through demographic resilience. Not superior technology, just more people. But here's the twist. When modern humans encountered Neanderthals, our archaeological record suddenly shows nearly identical technologies appearing in modern human sites. The lissoir technology, the systematic use of manganese dioxide, specific hafting techniques. We didn't replace Neanderthals through superiority. We learned from them. At El Sidron Cave, genetic evidence reveals a Neanderthal mother and infant who died together. Isotope analysis shows the child was well-nourished until the end. Even facing starvation, she prioritized her baby's survival. The clothing fragments found with them show multiple repairs. She mended their gear even as food ran out. 400,000 winters, no electricity, no metal. Fire that came and went like the seasons. They survived longer than our species has existed. Fire wasn't their greatest invention. Their greatest invention was refusing to accept impossibility. And somewhere in the 2 to 4% of Neanderthal genes most of us carry, that invention lives on.